And today we are going to be talking about some players that have risen and are going to fall now that the season is here. And obviously, we're here on Bleacher Report. You're with your host, Justin Henry, and for Bob Parmar P. The season is almost here. We got to talk risers and fallers, man, because we've had cuts today. We're seeing players go on IR. A lot of values are changing as we're heading into the season.
Yeah, we do got some values changing. The good thing about it is there's not as much that has like fluctuated based off of the cuts. So that's a good thing, a little bit more predictability. I mean, we got the scoop for you guys here today.
We do, chat. Make sure you guys join us. If you guys have questions, comments, or want to voice your opinion, definitely go into the chat and do that. But we have a few players we need to get into. And obviously, when you get into this time, it's like you've already drafted a lot of your teams. There's some that are going to be drafted in this weekend. But before we get into the season, it's like values do fluctuate at this point. We get finalization on depth charts, the rosters are there. And we talked about it. Some players who were kind of banged up going into the season, they hit IR. And that's what happened for the Tennessee Titans and Tajay Spears. He hit IR. So one of my risers heading into the year is Tony Pollard. And, Tajay Spears was dealing with a high ankle sprain that he suffered earlier this offseason. And Tony Pollard is kind of a forgotten name in the fantasy landscape. Like he's going outside of the top 20 running backs. And when we remember him, it's like you kind of saw him break down towards the end of last year. Tajay Spears got a lot more involved. But before that, Tony Pollard was like a top 15-ish type running back on a weekly basis. And right now he's currently going as the RB16 or RB26, excuse me, which is crazy to me. I think you're getting a solid RB2, especially for those who go wide receiver early, right? You address the receivers and maybe you get a quarterback and a tight end and you're looking for that zero RB type running back. Tony Pollard is the perfect fit for that. Now, you do have to worry about Tajay Spears coming back from the high ankle in about 4 to 6 weeks, depending on when he's available. But for the time being, I think you're getting a high-end RB2 for your fantasy team.
Yeah, dude, I'm a huge fan of Tony Pollard. He is one of those unforgotten guys, but somebody you can count on to fill out your RB2 there. So I'm loving that I'm loving that Tony Pollard pick.
So when you think about Tony Pollard though, like obviously he's getting on the older side. The one thing I would say is that at some point this year, if the Titans are bad, which I mean you got Cam Ward in there, we're kind of expecting the youth movement. I could see this in the second half going a different direction if Tajay Spears is able to get healthy. But I think for the meantime, like until Tajay Spears gets up to speed in this 1A, 1B type situation, I think Tony Pollard has a lot of value and is probably going to outplay his ADP. So definitely a riser on my chart heading into the season.
Yeah, I actually differ on that a little bit. I just think that Tony Pollard is the better back, and I think he showed that last year. And even with how abysmal they were as a team last year, he was still showing out. That team can't get any worse this year, and I think they're actually going to take a step up. So very high on Tony Pollard, even when that RB room is fully healthy. I just think Tajee Spears is just more of like a guy.
Yeah, I mean, he came in down the stretch and played really well. There's been so much offseason talk from Brian Callahan about getting him more involved. You never know what that looks like, but I think at some point this team has to figure out what this backfield is. Tony Pollard is on the wrong side of 25, and as his team does go with the youth movement, it's like you got to see what you have at some point. He could still be a factor down the stretch. Maybe it's not till week 17, week 18 that we see more carries go to the younger back. But I hear you on that. Tony Pollard is a player that we've trusted in our lineups before. You got to ride it till the wheels fall off at some time, at some points. What
Yeah.
about you, P? Who you got?
I mean, speaking of riding it till the wheels fall off, right? A faller that I got is actually it's Christian McCaffrey, right? And coming from me, a diehard Niners fan, this is a tough pill to swallow, but we're talking about somebody who last year was riddled with injuries. We're talking about somebody the year before who was used until his wheels quite literally fell off last year, right? So in training camp, there's nothing but positive things that they're saying about him. He looks, up to par. He looks just as fast as he was prior to the injury. But they've traded for Brian Robinson, right? So what that tells me is that this 49ers team, who does have playoff aspirations, who does actually have a really easy schedule, they plan to relieve some of that workload that Christian McCaffrey has because they are going to use him in the playoffs. They're going to use him later on in the season. Brian Robinson comes in, and he's a big back, and I foresee him taking around like anywhere between 7 and 10 touches. right? If you're looking at game script, I believe that Christian McCaffrey, if the Niners are up, then they can rely on Brian Robinson because they are going to be saving him more for the postseason. So, although right now Christian McCaffrey is going around the 1-2 turn, a lot of times you can get him in the early second round. There are just some wide receivers that I would probably prioritize of him because of this move and just understanding the nature of what the 49ers are looking to do. And yeah, so not going to drop off significantly. I just don't see that ceiling baked in as him potentially being the RB1. His ceiling kind of drops where his floor kind of comes up a little bit, and that's really all. That's really all what you
Well,
need
he
for
is. I mean, he
safety.
is going kind of high right now. He's going at the seventh overall pick as the fourth running back off the board. And for Christian McCaffrey, you talked about it like there's a qualified backup there now. The thing is, we all remember Christian McCaffrey at this 2019 pace where he caught, he had 1,000 yards, 100 catches. He's scoring damn near 30 fantasy points a game. This is a different offense. Like we're talking about, everybody wants to say he has the ceiling of the RB1. Well, there's other running backs out there, Bijan Robinson, Jameer Gibbs, that have that same ceiling without the inherent risk. And
Yeah.
now you're talking about a team that knows, okay, he's injured now. We know he had a calf injury last year, and he's probably 1 foot away from being like an Achilles again. Like that's the conversation we could be having about Christian McCaffrey. I'm not trying to wish that on him.
Yeah.
It is what it is. So I hear you. Like I kind of am with you there. He's been going a little too early in drafts for my liking. I think in the second round, I'm much more open to like the upside that's there than in the second round where he's currently going. Before we get into the third player, real quick, we had a couple of comments that came in. One of them was that Efton Chisholm made the Pats roster, the new Wes Welker, Danny
Hmm.
Amendola. They say he's on the rise. The only reason I don't know about that is because they already have like two of those receivers ahead of him in Pop Douglas and Stephon Diggs.
Yeah. I'm actually on that Chisholm bandwagon. I mean, he's been catching everything that they're throwing. He's a nice short yardage guy, and this is kind of where you make your name, right? Stephon Diggs is a little older, and he's coming off of an injury. They're looking for guys to step up. It's really just kind of like a wide receiver room that is pretty underwhelming. So if somebody's showing out in the preseason, and if they give him a chance, I mean, he's going undrafted right now. So low risk, high reward type shit.
Yeah, you might get, 5 catches for 50 yards out of him 1 week. But Well, another comment came in from Spicy Sponge, weird name, but said Caleb Johnson is better than Unc Pollard, old Unc Pollard. And you know what? The thing is with this P, I'm like, you can take upside with Caleb Johnson, but he's still got to earn a starting role. Like, I'm gonna go with the players who I know are producing. Who knows what we get out of Caleb Johnson this year? But I think at the draft cost, it's like, why would you go Caleb Johnson over Pollard?
Yeah, I'm with you on that. Caleb Johnson has high upside, but I feel like you know what you're gonna get with Tony Pollard. You know what I'm saying? Like you could tell he's gonna be one of those 4 yards a carry type guy. They're gonna be using him a lot. That is a running team that they have over there, and Caleb Johnson's upside just with that offense is gonna open thing. Excuse me, Tony Pollard's upside with that offense is gonna open things up. So yeah, I mean he doesn't have anybody ahead of him, and yeah, I'd go with Tony Pollard over
Yeah, especially
Caleb.
early on. Maybe late season we see something with Caleb Johnson. But if you're going to take a stab at running backs, or like younger running backs, they should have at least a positional path to like relevance, in my opinion. And I think when I look at this Cleveland Browns roster, especially knowing that Quinshon Judkins is facing potentially a suspension, there's been reports that he could go back to college, which are crazy rumors. And then there's also the fact that, they just cut Pierre Strong today. So there's a lot of fluidity with this running back room. And I think with this Browns team, you can find a valuable piece in here flex wise. And that's why to me, Dylan Sampson is a riser. There's been a lot of talk about him coming out of camp and having a strong role in the passing game, specifically in the passing game. And now I don't think he's, for those who don't know who Dylan Sampson is, obviously he's not like this every down back. That's not where we draft him. But in PPR leagues,
Hmm.
this is the kind of player that can give you a nice floor, be a nice flex play for you, even have some RB3 upside on a weekly basis. And I think he has the safest role here. It's him and Jerome Ford. And Jerome Ford, we've seen him in this role. It's been kind of mediocre. I think that's why you go get a Quinshon Judkins, you go get a Dylan Sampson. You try to get a little bit more out of the ground game. But this Browns team is going to be down in a lot of football games. And you got Joe Flacco, who's willing to check it down to the running back at times. So I know Dylan Sampson obviously was a later round pick, but this is a guy who's earned the trust of his coaching staff so far, and I see him having an immediate third down role, probably splitting work with Jerome Ford. Give me Dylan Sampson at his cost. He's going like outside of the top, 10, 11 rounds in fantasy right now.
I love that pick, Dylan Sampson. And yeah, he was drafted, I believe, in like the sixth round or later rounds. But I think that's a more testament to how deep this running back class was coming out than not, right? In other years, you could probably see him going in the third, fourth round. Either way, they got a really good talent, Dylan Sampson, and yeah, I'm trying to grab him up as well.
Yeah, I think it's a low cost, low barrier to entry for a back that maybe he's not like the upside of, the earlier backs, the Caleb Johnsons, the RJ Harveys, the Marion Hamptons. He doesn't have that upside, but he does provide like a nice base if you need somebody that can fill in during bye weeks or have flex appeal on certain weeks if he takes on a larger role. Like I said, this Browns room is wide open in my opinion. So I don't think he's gonna, he's not a touchdown scorer. This is one of those like Danny Woodhead, Shane Vereen, Darren Sproles type plays where you're hoping on the volume in the passing game. What about you, P? Who's next on your list?
Speaking of volume in the passing game, my biggest riser at the wide receiver position, or one of them at least, Ricky Pearsall, right? I think it's time we stop sleeping on Ricky Pearsall. I mean, people forget that the 49ers drafted him in the first round last year. And we're talking about a top five offense with little to no competition for targets, right? So we know Brandon Ayuk is starting on the PUP list, so that's about 6 weeks there. We know Juwan Jennings is dealing with calf issues, the same thing we've seen from Christian McCaffrey last year, and how dangerous that can be. But even when Juwan Jennings is back, I see Ricky Pearsall just seizing the number one wide receiver role. Last year, he was obviously a rookie, dealt with a gun wound, a gun injury early on, and took his time to get his wheels rolling. We've seen him take off in the last few games of the season against Detroit. I think going off for 8 catches, 141 and a touchdown, and then again with the Cardinals, breaking off for like 80 yards and a touchdown. And we've seen nothing but chemistry between he and Brock Purdy this offseason. And like I mentioned, the biggest thing that you want to look for in a wide receiver right now, he's going as wide receiver 40 in around the eighth or ninth round. That's the biggest steal, in my opinion, right? Because at the time that Brandon Ayuk comes back in around week 6, he's still going to have a ramp up period. Still going to have to build that chemistry. So he's probably going to be fully ready to go and fully Brandon Ayuk around week 8. By then, I think Ricky Pearsall has a huge chance to really solidify himself as a number one target in this offense. And if he keeps that going, it's only upwards from there. So definitely a strong riser for me due to the lack of competition that they brought in.
I like Ricky Pearsall, and I think he does have upside. Obviously, being a first round pick, you like you talked about, you saw the upside last year in a few games. The concern I have is when this offense is clicking, when Christian McCaffrey is on the field, it goes through him. George Kittle's on the field, it goes through him. When Brandon Ayuk comes back, he is a big part of this. So I think my initial concern is that he's probably the third best weapon in the offense right now. And I know that was a role for Debo, but we haven't really seen Pearsall be consistent with that. I do think he gets a bump up, and he's definitely worth the riser position, like you talked about. My concern is that when it comes to week 6, week 7, when Ayuk is projected to be back. If Juwan Jennings does sign with the team or he ends his injury, because I think this is an injury over money right now. If he doesn't go to IRPUP, whichever one it is, if he doesn't sit out a few games, I think he's going to be a valuable piece as well. So that's the only thing I have with Ricky Pearsall is that he's not an immediate part of the offense, and I think everybody's expecting him to be the lead guy. So if you think that, then yes, it's a much bigger riser than I have, but I think his value is definitely on the rise.
Yeah.
Couple things real quick. We had some breaking news come in. Obviously, today is cut day for a lot of teams and for every team. Cut deadline just happened. And there was one notable news piece. We also get people that go to IR or injured reserve, PUP. One person who has been a talking point this offseason has been Najee Harris, who signed with the Los Angeles Chargers. And one of the higher picks in fantasy right now has been Amarian Hampton. Najee is on the active roster, even dealing with his eye injury. And so it was just announced today that he is on the roster. Are you dropping Amarian Hampton? You're not worried about Najee. Obviously, a lot of people aren't worried about Najee. But talk to me about this because I think this is very relevant.
I think it's, you think it's very relevant. I, on the other hand, don't, right? I think it could be a situation, they're bringing Najee. I've seen them listed at the top of the depth chart as well. I just think that the rookie is going to have to come in and earn his keep, right? Whereas I looked at Amarion Hampton as somebody who's going to compete, somebody who's going to really have to take control of that lead role, and so I don't see it any other. I don't see it any different. What I know from Najee is, they signed him this offseason. They're not really giving him that much money. They're more invested in Omarion Hampton. They spent a first round draft pick on him. Najee, we know, is slow. He's never really been that exciting. Omarion Hampton is just as big as Najee and, faster and looks the part. So, for me, I'm still guns blazing Omarion for this one. I assume
I don't
I
get
assume
it.
you think
I just
different.
don't. I mean, I think Najee, like, if he's dealing with the eye injury, obviously needs to get up to speed, first of all. So I think you're justified if you took Amarian Hampton as like your RB2. I don't think that's a bad thing, but I think Najee probably has more value than we're giving credit for, especially in Greg Roman's system, where they do use two running backs. And a lot of times the veteran gets the early opportunity, as listed. You talked about he's listed first on the depth chart and is expected to be available at least sometime here in the first 4 games. So, I think when it comes to Najee Harris, this is a player who we've seen be valuable in the past for the Pittsburgh Steelers. You mentioned like he's not good. He's had 1,000 yards every single year, been an RB2 for the most part. So let's get into, obviously we can talk all day
We
about
get
Najee Harris and Amarian Hampton, but that is some news I think significant. And I
yeah,
do think Amarian Hampton is going to have to work into his role as opposed to
mhm.
being like coming out the gates 20 plus carries like some people are expecting.
I agree with that.
Another riser this offseason actually is going to be a receiver for Denver Broncos. And we saw them bring in Evan Ingram, and we know Cortland Sutton already has kind of a good role there. Marvin Mims has been a draft pick. They've used him in a variety of ways, right? Explosive plays, sometimes in the reverse game. But there's been talks that Pat Bryant for the Denver Broncos has been a piece that Sean Payton really likes, and obviously has compared to Michael Thomas. The team took him in the 3rd round, and Pat Bryant obviously has a path to significant playing time early on, probably in 3 receiver sets, and may be able to steal some work away as well, just based on how the season's going. And when you hear the name Michael Thomas, obviously Sean Payton loved Michael Thomas. And the reason why he's kind of gone up this draft board is because the team moved off another piece that they liked, Devon Vele. He was traded
Hmm.
to the New Orleans Saints. And so that opens up opportunity for a guy that's a bigger body receiver to make plays. And even though, he had a slow 40 time coming into the draft, this could be one of those players that's a little bit more of a steal. You don't really have to draft him in your 8 team leagues, your 10 team leagues, but P, in your 12 team leagues, you're looking at like, hey, some of these last picks, I'm looking for upside. You could do worse than Pat Bryant late in the drafts.
Yeah, and for me, I think I'd wait for somebody else to take a chance on Pat Bryan. When I'm looking at them, they already have their wide receiver one solidified, and they brought in Evan Ingram. And another thing we know about Sean Payton is he does love his talented pass catching tight ends as well. So yeah, I mean, you could get him relatively cheap, and I could see him being a riser as far as being significant. I don't know. I'd let somebody else take a chance on him.
Yeah, I think down in the late rounds, I think this is a player who has a path to like you can actually play him as a flex in a couple of weeks. I think there's a path there. Now he's also an easy move off, right? You realize, hey, he's not getting the volume we thought in the first couple of weeks. Cool, get rid of him, pick up somebody else. But I do think when you mention receiver and you mention starter and just being on the field, there's upside there. And I think where he's going outside the top 80 right now, outside the top 80 receivers, you could do a lot worse than Pat Bryant.
Yeah, facts, facts. So they got Cortland Sutton and Marvin Mims, then Pat Bryant and 3 wide receiver sets. Yeah,
It
I
should
could
be
rock
that.
with
And
that.
like I said, Mims is kind of more of, I don't know where he's gonna finish
Kind
out,
of
but
like
a
a
lot of
field
times they
stretcher,
use him
maybe.
in the reverse, yeah, or deep. Like he's not, I don't know if he's gonna be the every down receiver, at least as the season goes on, and Pat Bryant may have that opportunity.
All right,
What
cool,
about you,
cool,
P?
cool.
Who you got next on the list?
Jacoby Myers is right there. Yeah, so Jacoby Myers, we can talk him. I know I got so Jacoby Myers, I have him as a faller, right? So it's funny because he came in requesting a trade, right? And in this, he's probably bumping heads in this Raiders regime and whatnot. They drafted a few wide receivers ahead of him, or they drafted a few wide receivers coming into this class as well. So, but the biggest thing that you're seeing here is they brought in the wide receiver here. Um, Help me out with his name, Jay. I can slip my mind right
Amari
now.
Cooper.
They brought in Amari Cooper, so that's going to be the biggest downfall for Jacoby Myers. Now, he did request a trade, right? He has a chance to definitely become a riser, and I was really pegging him to be. I was really pegging him to be traded to the 49ers or traded to a wide receiver needy team, which would have, definitely a huge bump in his value. But right now, you have to consider him a faller.
I think you do too. Obviously, we're requesting a trade and you bring in Amari Cooper. It would have been easy to be like, oh, I think one of these other receivers, Jack Bash or Deontay Thornton, they're the risers, right? But I think there's too much, like, there's not enough answers here. We know sometimes receivers they become divas. They're like, oh, I want to be traded. And, really all they want is a paycheck. That's what they want. And so if the Raiders do pay him over the next week and a half, there's a chance he could be on this roster with Amari Cooper. And that would leave Jack Bash and Deontay Thornton probably invaluable right now. Like they just have no value. But there's also a chance that they move off of Jacoby Myers. They decide to actually grant him his trade request. And now we're talking about Amari Cooper, who didn't have the best second half of the year, but did have, he was still a good receiver even the year before that. I think we'll probably get a mixed bag when it comes to Cooper, but with Jacoby Myers, the part about him is that he's not a sexy name anyway. Like, it's not like I want to draft Jacoby Myers ever in the draft. That's like, I need a wide receiver 3 and I'm desperate.
Yeah.
Let me get some production. Even though he's like a top 20, 25 guy every year. So I just think that there's more upside where Jacoby Myers goes. And then when you talk about like the fact that we don't know if he's going to hold out or not, we don't know if he's actually that pissed off to where he's going to miss games. I don't really see Jacoby Myers on my draft board at all as well. So he's a good receiver. I think he's better than I am giving him credit for, than the fantasy community gives him credit
Yeah,
for.
yeah.
I just ain't drafting him.
No,
Straight
I
up.
feel you. I'm the same way. Not somebody you'd want to draft. I had aspirations for him being in this Chip Kelly like one read system because they do pepper their wide receiver one a lot. But I mean, who knows? This could be a ploy to just get a paycheck, like you said. But the fact that they brought Amari Cooper makes it makes the ball not really be in his court as much.
Yeah, let us know your guys' thoughts on the Raiders receivers. Couple chat comments came in there. One of them was a riser should be Tyler Warren, and they cut a couple tight ends off the roster today. Long time tight end Jelani Woods. There was a lot of upside for him in the dynasty community. That did not pan out. But Tyler Warren, yes, he's a riser. Obviously, no real threat tight ends. But if you just watch the preseason action, Tyler Warren, they were using him all over the field.
Yeah, dude, he looked like a young Brock Bowers out there, even though Brock Bowers still is young. But talking about like Tyler, and he didn't, you look at him, you don't think he's that athletic, but the way that they're using him, he's definitely a riser right now. He's going really outside of the top 10 tight ends in your drafts. So he is a snag, a late round TE for
Yeah,
me.
I do think he looks athletic. I think he looks athletic as hell, and he kind of reminds me of like Kittle. You know what I'm saying? Where they'll
Yeah.
use him out the backfield, like bigger body and great hands. So I like Tyler Warren a lot.
Mhm.
Spicy Sponge says, talk about my God, Xavier Legette, a riser. Listen, I haven't talked a lot about this. I'm going to, but I
Mhm.
really like Xavier Legette in this role right now that he's going to be in. He doesn't have to be the one. Ted McMillan's still dealing with the hamstring injury, his second hamstring injury this offseason. I think Xavier Legette, he showed flashes last year. I kind of think this is a player the fantasy community is like burnt on and sleeping on. He was a first round pick last year. Like there's some value here with Xavier Legette. So I don't know, man. I think as far as riser, you ain't got to draft him like that. He's
Mhm.
he's falling in drafts, but I agree with you. I agree with
No,
you. I like
yeah.
this the Legette pick, man.
I was a huge Leggett guy coming out, big body guy, really fast. And a lot of people in this Carolina offense, people are just in general sleeping on this Carolina offense. Like you said, you don't have to go out and spend a lot of bread or draft capital to get him. He's going relatively late in drafts right now. So I mean, you could do a lot worse as long as he can get out of his own way and stay healthy. I think he'll definitely turn some heads.
A quick note today: Devon Achan missed practice, and obviously
Mm.
he's been dealing with his soft tissue injuries, calf injury. P, you got anybody else on this list?
Yes, I do. Yes, I do. Speaking of, Devon Achan, a big riser that I have is Ollie Gordon, right? So even when Devon Achan is in there, Ollie Gordon is really going to fill that Raheem Mostert role that we've seen in the past. He's a big guy. This is something that they needed. A big bruising running back that is actually efficient. 6'1", 225 pounds, really an up the gut runner, and a goal line back, which is something really needed and something that they've missed. Preseason, how he's showing out. He really is the only healthy running back right now on the Dolphins, so he's getting a lot of opportunity. But he's almost 5 yards a carry in the preseason. I think it's like 26 carries for 126 yards and a touchdown. He's seizing his opportunity, and the Devon Achan injury is one thing, right? I think that he can have a role and he can be on your roster even when Achan is healthy. But Devon Achan's dealing with like the calf strains, and that's more impactful than people think. That's not something you could just bounce back from. That affects your burst, that affects your acceleration, and that's really what we know Devon Achan to be. A fast guy, really swifty, cutting and bursting up the field. If those calf strains don't really heal properly, they don't have time to heal, we can see it turn into something similar to what we've seen with Christian McCaffrey. A calf strain could then turn into, God forbid nothing crazy happens, but it can really get worse down the road if it's not really treated correctly. So Ollie Gordon right now is going undrafted. And a lot of times his stock is definitely rising. He's somebody you should definitely have on your radar because even when Devon Achane is healthy, he's definitely going to have a role.
Yeah, and Ollie Gordon obviously like coming out like I feel like this is one of those bruisers where you kind of know the touchdowns are coming. And the one thing was like Jalen Wright was in the way, and he's not anymore. Obviously, he's been inefficient. He's banged up right now. So you get a chance. Sometimes when the young player gets a chance, the older player loses that role. They don't ever get it back. I think with Ollie Gordon, there's a lot of room for upside here, especially if Devon Achane does happen to miss time early in the year. The expectation is that he should be available for week one, but you never know.
Never know.
One last riser, I think, and we kind of touched on this with Ricky Pearsall, but I think for those who are drafting right now, it's important to talk about. One last riser, I think, is George Kittle. Now, we don't talk about George Kittle because he's not one of these younger players. It's not an obvious, like, oh, now he's in a new role. George Kittle's in the same role, but we get McCaffrey back. Brandon Ayuk is out. Juwan Jennings is injured and maybe they say he might be, out for the first few games dealing with his injury. Who's going to be the number one pass catcher on this team? I think that's George Kittle. And George Kittle's been consistently, especially on a points per game basis, a top three tight end since we
Hmm.
can remember. And I think the one thing that, is here is there's a lot of volume, especially early. And the cool part about with George Kittle is you don't have to get him at Brock Bowers range, at Trey McBride range. You can get him in the fourth round and just know you're getting a very equal type of talent to Brock Bowers and Trey McBride. And I don't know why that we do this with the fantasy community. It's like the young players, they all get bumps up because we're expecting upside. But literally, George Kittle is going like, as you can see right here, 20
Hmm.
picks after Brock Bowers, and they're not that much different. So I think George Kittle is one of those anchors you can build on, especially if you want to take early tight end or you're looking for that positional outlier. Just wait. You don't have to get Brock Bowers, who has to now deal with Amari Cooper potentially and with Ashton Genty being drafted. It's a different offense. Trey McBride, there's an assumption that Marvin Harrison takes a bigger role. With George Kittle, we know he's a focal point of this offense, and there's less receivers. Debo's gone, and Ayuk is injured. Give me all the George Kittle I can get in the fourth round, especially if he happens to slip there.
Definitely the best value, I believe, in the wide receiver, in the or excuse me, tight ends. You got to keep in mind that the two tight ends that they're taking ahead of them, they're on kind of like subpar offenses, or maybe we could say offenses that we just aren't as confident in. George Kittle's on a top five offense. Very little target competition, right? Whether it's middle of the field, between the 20s, red zone, he's getting peppered. And this is the season where he's going to have all you can eat. This is a season he can have all you can eat. So the fact that people are taking like Brock Bowers at average draft position at 17 and 20 spots later is George Kittle to me is crazy.
Yeah. It is crazy to me, and he's the last of the elite guys. That's why I think he should be a riser, and he's kind of more of like this quiet asset just because he's an older name. It's like, oh, George Kittle, kind of like how we were talking about with Jacoby Myers, but it's like George Kittle has upside this season. And to be honest, this could be one of the last prime George Kittle
Hmm.
seasons we see, just because he's kind of getting up there in age. I'm sure this team will transition at some point, offensive piece wise, but without Debo Samuel, he's going to be their biggest yak guy. Like Brandon
Hmm.
Ayuk is going to be there, but and I know Pearsall has some yak ability, but George Kittle is their yak guy. So I think that there's a lot of upside here with Kittle. Couple of last questions that came in. Bobby said, "Yep, Warren is like Jeremy Shockey." That's actually a really good
That's
comment. You
a
can get the
name
free flowing
drop.
hair.
That's a name drop right there. Jeremy Shockey was nothing to be played with back in the early 2000s.
Yeah, I hope he's more Kelsey or Kittle-ish, but Jeremy Shockey's fine. Y'all giving away my secret tech. I don't even know what the secret tech means, but you know what I'm saying? At least we come in here with that fantasy knowledge, P. I'm telling y'all, if you rock with us, you're gonna have a very strong chance of winning your championship, man.
Nothing but dropping game on this channel right here. Nothing but game nuggets for y'all, man. We got
La-
you.
Last one that came in, man, real quick. What do you think of Mason Taylor? Because we've seen Justin Fields, and there's been mixed reports on him. Some days he looks good. Some days it looks like he can't complete a pass. We know Garrett Wilson's like the focal point. There's been a lot of talks about Brees Hall potentially getting traded, or his value in the offense. Mason Taylor, second round pick, like he steps into an immediate role with Justin Fields, and we know Justin Fields like he was targeting Cole Kmet when he was there with Chicago.
Yeah. Listen, anytime that you got a lot of chatter about like inconsistencies in an offense and things like that, that presents opportunities. Mason Taylor has draft capital. Mason Taylor is running in a similar offense to what Ben Johnson did. He's a Ben Johnson disciple out there running that offense. And so we've seen what Laporta's doing. So, you can't, I mean, his price right now is so cheap that you can't go wrong. I mean, I would draft him as like a back end or like your tight end too, just in case you miss on some of these players. Just somebody who does provide a lot of upside. So, I mean, that's what I think about Mason Taylor. I think he's solid. He's got the draft capital and he's got a good play caller. So we think calling that offense.
I think he has upside. I just don't know. Like, I think the one thing about Laporta is he was tied to a better pocket passer.
Oh yeah, of
You know what I'm
course.
saying? And like he came in and obviously like had that upside because of that. When
Hmm.
it comes to Justin Fields, I think it's there. It's just the floor is a lot lower. You get him at your tight end too, though, which is I think that's the best way to do it. You get him as your tight end too, and you kind of just hope for the best. If you don't see nothing in 2 weeks, you rip and replace, man. You just get a new tight end. So
Yeah, and there's a lot of value in having players that you can like unemotionally just drop. A lot of
buy.
value in that, underrated. Just you know what I'm saying? Like it's just an empty roster spot basically.
Yeah,
So
because you draft him or K Dotton, and I like K Dotton, but I'm just saying you have to hold on to K Dotton. You're more likely to hold on to him than if Mason Taylor's terrible for 2 weeks. You're like, bye, see ya.
deuces.
So let us know your guys' thoughts overall on our risers and fallers. We have the fantasy stock risers and fallers here. After roster cuts and transactions, we have Tony Pollard at our number one spot as a riser, Christian McCaffrey as a faller, Dylan Sampson, Ricky Pearsall, Pat Bryant all as risers, Jacoby Myers a faller, and then Ollie Gordon and George Kittle as risers. Anything else, P? We are getting ready to head into week one next week. Obviously, we'll have a lot more your guys' way to get you ready for the season. Any parting thoughts before we get off?
This is one of the weeks where a lot of fantasy drafts are happening right now. So just stay tuned. Look at our past shows, look at our shows now, look at our scheduled upcoming shows, and get all the game you can. But just do not panic and just go into your drafts with a game plan, baby.
Never panic, and you're obviously going to get all kind of brand new information over this time that makes you think and rethink. And just as we got in right now, the Cleveland Browns have named Dylan Gabriel as the QB2. So Shador Sanders, man, is he getting the? That's a question we got to talk about really quickly.
Hmm.
Is he getting a fair shake right now? Because to me, Shador looked the part, and if you saw him in college, you know what you're getting. To put Dylan Gabriel up ahead of him, you agree with that?
I don't. I don't. I mean, I think Dylan Gabriel, he has in his last game, he looked better, but he was also playing with some of the ones and some of the twos. Shador didn't look as good, but he's also playing with a lot of threes, a lot of fours. A lot of players that he's playing with aren't even on the team anymore. So I think it's asinine, and I could really get into it, but I'm gonna just hold my peace, man. I'm gonna just hold my peace. Send Shador to the Niners, baby. We'll show you how to use him, man.
I think Shador is going to have his opportunity at some point. Maybe they just want to see what they got in Dylan Gabriel. But if you watch both guys play, I know Dylan Gabriel looked up and down throughout the preseason, but like Shador looked the part. He
Yeah.
looked the part to all of us. So who knows what it is? But that does it for this episode of Fantasy Stock Watch. We will see you guys on the next one. Peace out.